its benefits, it's the 6 strands of learning community are realized through social media. Any literature on social media does highlight these six benefits. And in the spirit of student-centeredness, students chose to use WeChat as their main form of communication with us. I have tried Teams chat with them. I don't get response. We use Teams online for the classes. That's fine, but I use WeChat as well. And certainly with WeChat, the students can set up their own groups. They set up the class groups, personal group, project groups. It's inclusive. It's got, audio. The students can be responding to each other with image or video or audio. And it's also validating because, they can respond to each other with pictures, which we found, makes a really nice, warm, friendly environment, which all the literature says is absolutely critical to develop a successful learning community. And in terms of engagement, it's students' choice. They like it. It's convenient. They know it. And it's also acted as a really good secondary form of communication for us. If we're in a class environment on Teams, if there's any outages, then we can get the students back online quite easily. Can I just ask people to go on mute? I'm getting some crackly noise in the background. Thank you. Okay. And also as well, it's, as I said, it's their choice. So they're more engaged through social media. And they can easily set up contact with students in NTU, whom I've introduced them to. We've got other international students they can make contact with and set up groups. So it gives them that sense of belonging that is so necessary to learning community. They can connect with CUC students in the UK, other international students as well. And then in terms of the impact, we interviewed 6 of the students to ask them about whether they thought those 6 essences of learning community were realized through using WeChat. And I think it's clear to see on the screen that, yes, they are. And in terms of the future, I want to experiment more with using WeChat actually in more class activities. So we have used it for short voice pieces. I've modeled pronunciation, words and phrases students have difficulty with. I've then sent it to them in WeChat actually as I'm teaching. But I think there's a whole realm of areas that I can use that are beyond just communicating. And then the second area I'd like to talk about is social events. So when we're in China, social events form a big part of our building the family, as Stuart mentioned, the family-like interaction. They're also getting a lot of language practice, a lot of speaking practice. It builds their confidence. And we would do those events every week, a lot of interaction. And then when we went online, I was very concerned that would be lost. And interestingly, Bruce and Stakunis's report for Barleap in 2021 highlighted that there were a number of concerns amongst teachers that their students weren't getting that speaking practice that is so critical. And furthermore, Duff highlights that the informal everyday aspects of language are as vital as those in the classroom. So, I mean, initially thinking about this was, that my students aren't getting that speaking practice. So what did I do? Well, I thought I need to create something online. So I set up weekly Sunday socials the students meet me on a Sunday and other students, and we talk. There's no fixed agenda. The students choose the topic. Those topics can range from food to UK culture, and then in particular for journalists, it might be news events of the week that are happening in China or the UK. I invite a number of different students. So we have international students, we have students on other programs in the UK, we have CUC UK students who've gone to the UK in their second year. And I've found that it's enabling them to build bonds, they're making contact, they feel included, they're connecting with the university, which is so important for retention. They're getting feedback from the other students on their opinions. It's very student focused because the students are choosing what topics they want to talk about. And then interestingly as well, you know, that I feel that they're more engaged because it's not something I'm throwing at them to do. They're setting the agenda, they're choosing what they want to talk about. And, you know, it builds their confidence and their language. And then the second thing that I've set up as well is I've teamed up with the Global Lounge, which is a team within the university who their sole job is to connect international students through events. So I've teamed up with them. We have events every 2 weeks. I've invited, again, we've got CUC UK students, we've got international students, we've got other student bodies, and we're now incorporating more universities within China to these events. Some of the events we do, we've got festivals, often starts with a short presentation followed by discussion, and again it's all student led. We've had live cooking, and that's followed by a discussion. We have online games. Two come to mind, which are Gartic and Type Racer. So the students get into the game, log on. It's competitive, so it's quite motivational. It gets quite noisy, but there's also space within those games to actually chat and talk. And then in April, we're going to do 2 face-to-face events on campus. The UK students are going to do a presentation on the Qingming Festival, and that will include, they're going to do a presentation, poem reading, some food, and then we're going to go for a walk around the campus. And we can also live stream that back to the students who are in China. And then in terms of feedback from the students, well, I'll let them speak for themselves as to whether they think it's beneficial. So I hope the sound's going to work on this. Do let me know if the sound, you can't hear anything.
I think Sunday Social is
the sound okay?
Yes, it's working.
Pretty good for me, because from Sunday Social I have practiced lots of my oral English in daily lives.
Sunday Socials made me know more about English culture, and I also contacted with my CUC friends in NTU now.
I believe Sunday Social helped me with my daily English conversation.
I think Sunday Socials helped my speaking and connected me with students in NTU.
The Sunday Socials made me feel part of the CUC and NTU learning community, which has helped me know about my subject, feel supported by other students, and develop my English and confidence.
Okay, so I think we can say they kind of speak for themselves, really. Just let me go back. Okay, and you know, we can hear echoes of those, again, those 6 strands of learning community coming through. And then in terms of a survey, we surveyed the 32 students we had in terms of what they thought, whether they thought that there's the strand of learning community plus the language development was being realized through the socials. And I think it's clear to see that they think they are. And then in terms of a post-pandemic future and the socials, well, my aim is to continue to develop the events, possibly get more students across more disciplines, you know, in terms of widening those learning communities. And then finally, in terms of, again, the 6 strands, and I want to talk about how we weaved that through our class contact and our learning activities. So in terms of, I'm going to pick out two examples, which are group writing and project work. So in terms of group writing, I always use shared documents. I get students working together, obviously for that bonding activity, and they'll work on shared documents, which Bruce and Stakunis have highlighted as being quite motivational, because if they're in shared documents, they can see each other working, they're getting feedback in real time. And in that sense, it's quite engaging. And then this would be a typical kind of activity. And key to this as well is peer review for validation. So here, students write a claim, they've been given the evidence, they write the claim, they identify the evidence, then they swap the work. Another breakout room will peer review that work. And, you know, that can be in terms of correcting, which is language development, comments, but also we use emoji rating for that validation. And another example would be, so their project work. Now, at the end of the course, they have a assessed presentation, but I put them into groups. I give them a broad topic, and then the students have to go away and explore what argument they want to present. And through that process, they are bonding, working together, supporting each other, very, very key for learning community. It's got a real world value, because this one is for journalists. The journalists, it relates to their MA. It's motivational, engaging, because they're actually choosing what argument they want to pursue. It's validating, because through the process, they are giving each other feedback, they're supporting each other, sharing ideas, and that hopefully gets them in the best possible shape for their final assessment. And then when asked, you know, we asked the 32 students what they thought, again, whether they thought the 6 strands plus language development was realised through the activities. And again, I think they are. And in terms of their assessment, well, they all passed. And in some cases, we found that there was a higher average in some skills than the previous year. And then looking to the future, things I want to work on is peer review away from class. I find that students aren't always that willing to do that, and that's, you know, that saves time for the language work, validation, and to build their confidence, because I truly believe that when they are confident to comment on other people's work, you know, they feel stronger. You know, that's always a sign for me that they're quite confident. I want to build in different peer review methods. We tend to focus on sort of emojis and writing, but actually, you know, they can be using video, audio, to be more inclusive in the way that we give feedback. And then also I think is absolutely key as well is the ongoing training in peer review. It's something, you know, that it takes students time to feel confident and have those skills to be able to do it well. Okay, so I'm going to hand over now to Stuart, and we can take questions, and we can also we're going to, you know, we'd like you to engage as well in terms of some of these key areas. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stella. That was fantastic. Exactly. So we always intended this session to be at least half the time for discussion. So we're well on track for that. There's quite a large group of people here, which is so good to see. And so whatever your perspective, whether you are involved with the strategic implementation of a partnership from the managerial side, your insights would be really welcome. Or the more operational tactical delivery as well. And we've set out some issues to think about. It's great to hear that some colleagues are in China because we have been unable to get back. So the things that Stella has talked you through, that they arose out of an acute need as we shifted online, but this has become a chronic situation where we're continuing to operate what is in effect a hybrid system, because these courses that we're discussing, they were designed to last for 2 years. The first year taught with us in Beijing, and then the students come to the UK in the second year. So the effect of the pandemic is that couldn't happen in the first instance, and now there's a reduced number of students coming over. So we are still operating largely online for the Chinese students. So I think that even when we get back to normal, whatever that is, the things that we're doing will continue, not least with the use of WeChat. So I think that now would be a great time to engage with the discussion. And if I may, I can immediately have some responses. So Chris, you asked about a VLE. Nottingham Trent University has a Nottingham online workplace now. That's what we use. The company that designed that is called Desire to Learn, which is a US-based company. That is something that we can discuss some more. It is not easy getting the students to use that workplace. They find it very slow, but getting them to engage with the material that we upload is a challenge. But that VLE is used for disseminating information, material to support teaching, and crucially as well for uploading assignments through the Dropbox. So they have to use it. Bruce, you asked, does everybody have to use WeChat in terms of the members of staff? The answer to that is no. And there has been some resistance to using WeChat, and I can understand why. It's not easy to register as well. If you're a new user, somebody has to recommend you. We complement our communication with WeChat using email. So if we're giving feedback or a grade with the work, I might send a group message to the WeChat board, and then I would send individual emails to the account. But as I say, using the online workplace is a challenge, and these are students that pretty much exist without email, that email is not familiar to them, so that WeChat is a good way, a conduit to get them to use email. Cora, you asked some interesting things about politics and data security. We are mindful about that. There is no end-to-end encryption with WeChat in the way that maybe WhatsApp has or Telegram. So the way that we use it, we're mindful of the sensitivities of using that for the students, but also for us. In terms of politics, well, I teach journalism. One thing that I engage the students with are news values. So an event happens, is it news? It might be news in one jurisdiction, but not in another. So I get the students to engage with that and think about why. Yesterday, for my media and the journalism students, I gave a very long lecture and a seminar about what's happening in Ukraine. So I know that that is dealt with in a very different way with China. So I don't shy away from engaging with these issues, but it's more done in a way to try to get the students to reflect for themselves rather than being overtly political. But everything's political, I think. So they're my immediate responses to those things. One thing that I would add as well at the end that maybe is of interest, the work that Stella does with PEEP, that's very much in-sessional, and it's for students that do not have the requisite IELTS score. So that those that do, they don't follow the PEEP course, they just do their academic program. But I know from experience, the students that would benefit the very most from what Stella does are the ones with the best English, because it's not just language, it's so much more. It genuinely is for academic purposes. So that's a reflection on that aspect. But we would love to hear from you, so please do feel free to write a question or just to speak up. That would be great.
Michael looks like he's got a question.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm looking at the wrong screen. It's just really a comment about WeChat. I'm in China, and at the beginning of the pandemic, all the teaching was happening online on various platforms, and teachers were setting up WeChat groups for kind of classroom management things, so that the students who couldn't hear the sound or my internet's dropped out were then using WeChat as a kind of parallel channel. And as we've got back into the classroom, teachers have kept those going. So we've actually got a lot of teachers are having a WeChat event at the same time that they're teaching in the classroom, and it's actually a very positive thing.
Wow.
Because it allows students who are perhaps a little bit shy to put their hand up, or needs a little bit more time to formulate questions, they can put them in the WeChat, and it includes them more in the class. And I've observed classes and watched these things happening, and it's productive and it's sensible, and it's not students kind of going, oh, I'm bored, I want to go home. It's actually really, really productive. And it's something that I'm hoping will continue. That whatever channel it is, whether it's WeChat or there's another one called Ding Talk in China or WhatsApp, I think it's a really good enhancement to the teaching. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Michael. That's great to hear. That's what we hope would be the case. So to get news from you on the ground that is really happening is, that's what we anticipate. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, and I just saw, so Joanne just asked a question, do they communicate in English? And generally, yes. And there's occasional sort of, what was that word? And somebody will translate it into Chinese. But that's just exactly what happens with in a normal class, I think, with people just whispering to their friends.
And I think it's interesting. I know when I first started and I'd have WeChat going and I'd have Teams going, it was, you've got to kind of monitor 2 channels of communication, which is quite tough initially, but you get used to it. And then you actually almost have these 2 lifelines going, and you can be quite flexible. And that's why I use WeChat again at the same time, but it tends to be kind of for communication and for the odd kind of message and say a pronunciation of a word or something. But I want to expand that, I think, because they're confident using it. And I'm confident now having those 2 channels, that I just think I could be doing a lot more with it, because it is so useful, but it's also what students are, they're confident in, they trust. you know, so they almost would prefer to use that, I think, than Teams in some respects.
Yeah, I mean, our students don't use Teams at all. And what you were saying about email and the VLE, we're also on the Desire to Learn. It's called Surrey Learn. It's sort of half bespoke. They will use Surrey Learn for things like submissions and getting feedback. But it's if you want to make sure that students all get a certain message, then it's WeChat all the way.
Exactly. Yeah.
I started off sort of trying to fight against it, kind of go, no, WeChat is, and to be honest, I don't particularly like using it myself, but it is in China, it is the most effective method of communication.
Exactly. And what sorry, I'm rambling on here, but often as well, so I'll still post messages to students on Teams, but I'll screen grab the message and I put it in WeChat. So, you know, it's kind of there for the record and for other people to see, but then, you know, I put it in their WeChat groups as well. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I think Cora has a question. Cora, do you want to ask your question?
Who's Cora?
I'm not sure. It says
Is it
Cora,
me?
Cora Lindsay. I don't know.
Oh,
And then are you Lucy?
yes.
Yes. Okay. Do you want to ask?
No,
I
sorry, I don't know why that name came up. No, I just wanted to add to what Michael was saying. Actually, I think we're in the same university, Michael. But yeah. So
Which
yeah, Dufay Dongchai.
Oh yes, we are.
Yes. So but I'm in Dongchai. But I was teaching online last semester in Scotland, and I didn't have access to WeChat, but my students really liked Zoom. And we didn't even try Teams because of the connection issues, but my students really liked Zoom. They were keen on using Zoom, so we used that quite a lot. And it's got some interesting functions. So you can create breakout rooms, you can create quizzes, you can do lots of interactive stuff in Zoom actually, and they were quite keen on that. But I'm now in China, and we do use WeChat actually. We use WeChat to communicate with the class monitors and the commissaries and to share documents. It's very useful for sharing documents when you're in class. We also use Blackboard, which is not functionally, Blackboard I don't like very much at all, and the students are not particularly keen on it either actually, but I did find that Zoom was really popular. So I just wanted to add that, just because.
Yeah, if I may, Lucy, thank you very much. That's great to hear about that. I'm not surprised to hear about the popularity of Zoom. I know that there's also a comment there about VUV. Yeah, that's also what we've used. And in fact, I did a course where we shifted for strategic reasons. The university moved from Zoom to VUV, and Zoom was much more effective and much more popular. But in terms of our delivery with Trent, we cannot use Zoom for teaching. It's all Teams. And that's another thing with the Teams chat. I've also experienced where the students are in the class, but they say they cannot see the chat function in Teams, which means that also is why the WeChat group messaging is also very effective.
Yeah, it's very effective, WeChat, and they're all familiar with it as well.
So, Cora,
We've had a message from Cora to say
Yes,
she's back.
Hi, I'm sorry, I had a phone call, so I left you. No, I'm sorry, I may have missed things, but I mean, I wanted to ask Mike, perhaps in particular, about this issue of WeChat, because we really don't encourage it here at the university. I'm at the University of Nottingham. We really don't encourage it for things like data gathering, communication with our students, just because of the security issues. I just wondered, I mean, maybe, for example, Mike, you know, being in China, or anybody else have any thoughts about that? And I'm sorry if I missed something that did talk about that, but
I mean, it's first of all, it's hi Cora, it's nice to see you.
Hi Mike, nice to see you too, hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a different world in terms of data protection. I have to get a health code every morning to be allowed to go onto campus, and I have to submit my personal health information through WeChat, as does everybody else on the campus, in order to get approval to go onto campus. Now, I can't imagine that would happen in the UK. There would be just so many issues about people saying that I'm not sharing that information on this platform, but it's just not an issue in China.
Yeah.
We're careful about it. We're careful about you know, what we would ask students to submit through WeChat, but we don't use it for anything particularly sensitive. We would only use it to give information to students. And if we've done sort of academic research, we've publicized it through WeChat, but then we've used University of Surrey, things like Microsoft Forms that would meet UK standards. But in day-to-day life, WeChat is that the sensitivities over data protection, data security are just very, very different.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I just thinking particularly if you're talking about a journalism course, you know, are there not how open do the students feel they can be through WeChat, for example? But thank you, Mike. That's really interesting to hear.
Yes, and thank you, Cora. So when we are engaging with the actual the issues themselves, I mean that will happen through Teams in terms of the kind of the class delivery, and also that they might submit work that I will then respond using email. So I'm mindful of that. But for example, when I've had tutorials, one-to-ones, when I go through with the students, I'll often use WeChat, the voice function as well, basically to give them a call on the phone. When I raise issues in class, what I try to get them to do and what they're more comfortable with is that they might take an issue to do with, for example, social media and the use of celebrities, and they might bring in a Chinese example. So they'll use the academic theory, but they'll apply it to a case study that they're comfortable with. So I try not to enter into this kind of self-censorship, but on the other hand, I've got my eyes open in terms of this. But it's a very, very important question. There's lots of great things. So Chris asks, how far has the use of WeChat and other online platforms eaten into teachers' time? That I think is a fantastic question, because the thing that Stella didn't mention, but was implicit in what she said with Sunday socials, it's in the title, she devotes an inordinate amount of time to these students, well above and beyond the idea of treating this just as a job with fixed hours. So
yeah, but I'd add to that as well. You know, I don't. You know, an hour out of my time on a Sunday isn't very much. I don't prepare for it. I made that really clear. I'm not preparing for this. It's going to be free and informal, and you students are going to generate this. That's the point. So you know, for me, that isn't a lot of time. For other people, yes, that might be, that's my Sunday, I'm not free at that time, but it makes such a massive difference to my relationship with the students and my knowledge of them and their knowledge of me, and going back to learning community, their trust of me, that it's well worth the time invested. It makes my day-to-day job much better than if I didn't know them and I hadn't built up that relationship. I just think it's absolutely critical. So, you know.
Yeah, I agree, but it is, you have enormous commitment to the students. And the other thing as well, of course, is that we're operating with a 7 or an 8 hour time difference. And they're quite reasonably large numbers of students as well. So I can be responding to WeChat messages at all hours. And again, that's something that is others are mindful of, and they'll actually say that I will check this or I'll respond at this time. So yes, these are really important things to think about and to anticipate.
I suppose I'd add to that as well that, you know, I did notice when we're in China, we're kind of taken away from our families and our day-to-day life in the UK, and we have the time to devote a lot extra. When I was in the UK teaching students in China, I've found my time is eaten up more, and it's quite interesting. You do reflect on, actually, I've got more things to do in the UK than I do in China. You know, I probably, if you brought the students to the UK, I certainly couldn't do the level of socializing that that we all do with them in China. It's less, and even the online that we do with them, the global lounge stuff and the Sunday socials, it's a lot less than what we do in China, but it is going some way to replicating what we do in China.
Chris has his hand up, if you've seen that.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So I'm a staff developer with our Lancaster's China partner, and the reason I asked the question about this, you know, the time management of this, is that the staff I'm dealing with, I'm really trying to encourage them to be as interactive as possible with their students, and they're using WeChat and all sorts of things, but they do say that it's very, very difficult to manage the time to facilitate online chats, online forums, and I find it difficult because I'm not getting the balance right myself, to be honest, to advise them. And I was wondering whether people in the group had thoughts about whether it is how to manage your time. I mean, partly if you're in the UK, obviously there's a time difference, but if you're actually in China as well, are you always, you know, just checking something and responding, or do you set specific times and say you will only respond in this time? Do you leave the students to actually manage it themselves? How far do you try to steer conversations? So those are the kinds of questions that will be useful for me to discuss with my members of staff out in China. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yes, those issues that you raised there are really fundamental. We found that when we were doing face-to-face and we were actually in China, in Beijing, really it was a bit like being on call all the time, really. And also when you build up the kind of the relationship with the students, sometimes that we might be, I mean, I might go to restaurants and eat with the students occasionally as well. Or we might be visiting museums or parks and things as well. So it was very fluid, this idea of when you were on call and when you were not. Other members of staff, they clearly would set boundaries. You can mute a chat function in WeChat, and I have colleagues that would clearly say, I will check my WeChat at this time, and others that would say that you must contact me by email. Somebody else in the chat there said about using email, the students are not familiar with it, so we consciously get them to use it, and we tell them about kind of email etiquette and how to begin and end an email. That's very important. And remember as well that the students, when they got so much attention from us when we were in person in China, it was a very different experience when they were just one student among many others, including domestic students, when they were in the UK for their second year. So they got a very different experience. The thing that I really like about the program as devised by Nottingham Trent is this: before the pandemic, it was 2 years. They got so much pastoral support and building up of relationships in the first year that really gave them the confidence, the language ability, the maturity to thrive in their second year when they were in the UK, because they had really strong peer group friendships. They're living together. They had met either directly or online members of staff. They were familiar with a Western style of teaching that was student-centered with lots of group work. So that gave them the confidence. And our colleagues in Nottingham would reflect on, it's great to see the Chinese students working with non-Chinese students in the class and in group work, and that hadn't have happened before. It was very much in silos. So we really do reap the benefits of that, just like Stella said. I mean, you can clearly see the advantages. And I think back before I'd been in China, and I could then put myself in the shoes of these Chinese students and other international students that just landed in the UK for their 1 year MA, thrown right in at the deep end. It must have been so challenging for them. So I think this whole thing about transnational education and the privilege we have, it's delivered in English, to scaffold and structure the language and all the other things as much as possible is really, really important. And as Mohammed has said with the message there about understanding is the crucial thing, I completely agree. If I've got a concept that has one meaning in a dictionary and another meaning in a museum context, I will absolutely say, right, what's that in Chinese? Translate that. I even say, well, can someone just explain that little bit in Mandarin so that I can try to engage everybody in the class. So that's very effective. So it's this session was very much designed to hear from you guys. So to hear from Michael and others about your experience of being back in the classroom and the effectiveness of WeChat, but from other colleagues saying having a different attitude towards that social media is really great to hear. Thank you.
I've just seen as well in the comments, so somebody says, you know, setting ground rules in week 1 is really important, and I totally agree. So just going to the point, back to the point about kind of controlling that so that you're not on call all the time. I think, you know, setting those ground rules in week 1, you know, I won't reply to students after a certain time. You know, we kind of agree what times we're going to communicate. And also, because I've got some quite strong members of the group as well, you know, we have what we call class monitors, and they're really useful for actually answering some of the questions that are in WeChat as well. So it doesn't all have to be about the teacher. Again, it goes back to the learning community and, you know, putting other students in charge for periods of time and just making sure all the students are getting the information they need. So I've certainly found that helpful, is leaning on some of the other students.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a point that Laura's made in your comment. Laura, I don't know whether you wanted to to come in and introduce yourself and say what you're doing and any reflections that you've got, because you've got loads of insights.
I can't see if I can put my camera on, sorry. You'll just have to make do with my voice. Yeah, I mean, basically, I think most of what I've thought about your talk is everything that I've been doing as well. It's, you know, learn from it. We've learned from the experience of being in China, and we're trying to take that experience of China and bring it to the UK and do it across, like you said, Stu, the 8-hour time difference is a killer because it restricts our working day to a matter of a few hours. So, you know, and my students in particular, they have full-on days, and then they come, I'm trying to find at the moment times to do tutorials with them, but they have full-on classes all day. Then they come to me at 6 p.m. in the evening for a class till 9 p.m. in the evening. And when am I supposed to do tutorials? At 10 p.m? It's, yeah, so, you know, it's about finding the flexibility, I think.
Great, that's, yeah, exactly. And that's, Laura, your point there is exactly what, after this session at 10 o'clock, I then teach my students, and they started at 9 o'clock their time, so they'll finish at 9 p.m. their time. So yes, so there are challenges. Laura, did you want to say anything about the students that you're working with? I'm curious to know about the undergraduate. You know,
I'm
how are they
finding
very different than?
They are very, very different. Yeah, it's I mean, I've taught undergrads obviously in the UK, but it's a very different beast teaching the undergrads in China to teaching the postgrads in China. And so what I'm finding at the moment is because they have no study ability, let's say, I'm teaching responsibility. I'm teaching the difficult thing for me has been they're all in a classroom, in the same classroom, while I'm in the UK. So fostering group work has been a nightmare because two people can't turn their microphones on at the same time because of the reverberation that we get. And then when they're in a classroom all on their own, they feel like nobody's watching them. So they start chatting, and it kind of snowballs into they're not doing the work. They diversify. And it's just, yeah, I'm finding it very, very challenging. So again, I'm experimenting with different things to try and sort of counteract all of this at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Laura. So Laura's doing a fantastic job there in really difficult circumstances. So before the pandemic, Trent had validated an undergraduate partnership as well. So we've now got, it's going to be up to 60 undergraduates coming through at CUC. And then we have 3 MA programs as well. Fatima, did you want to ask something?
I would just like to add that the way we use WeChat, so we teach undergrad students, but they all STEM science courses, and it's very similar to the way Stella described. So during the class, if we are doing, for example, a text, or if there's questions, students will use WeChat to respond. I think also our class setup is very different because we use Teams. But how it works is that we have a computer in the classroom and we have a teaching assistant, and she would log in, or the class monitor would log in, and we are actually cast onto the projector. And that's to replicate, you know, as close as possible to what it would be like face to face. And so the students don't connect through Teams because that wouldn't work, because we always have connectivity issues. And that is why they would respond with WeChat. And so the TA also assists in monitoring the classroom, making sure that the students are in groups. And so we use WeChat to communicate with the TA, to communicate with the students. So we couldn't actually successfully, sometimes when there are audio issues as well, we use the WeChat audio. I would do a voice call, you know, initially, especially when there were lots of teething problems. So we have found WeChat to be very useful. And also, I think when we have new teachers on board, so fortunately, everybody's been able to join WeChat. There were instances where teachers never had WeChat before, and we had to use Ding Talk. But again, for staff to staff communication, when someone is having an issue, you know, they will send a message to the group and the rest of us will respond. And there is that kind of support as well while you are teaching.
Thank you so much, Fatima. What institution are you at, please?
So I'm teaching at Fujian University in the Fujian province. But it's in partnership with Maynooth University, and it's the International Engineering College.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. That's a really good insight. Thank you. Joanne mentions about splitting into groups. My understanding of it that would be good to do. We have a very clear commitment, however, that the class contact time has to be a certain set number of hours that we must deliver. They must be in the classroom for a certain time. So that adds a challenge.
Okay. We do have that problem, but I think since the pandemic, we've been sort of able to be a bit more flexible. And you kind of think, well, the students might be doing something else, they might be learning. It's not just the teaching hour. I think we've managed to establish, at least at the moment, that the teaching hour is not just when we're speaking, it's when the students are learning something. That is a difficult thing to get people to accept for sure. But I think at the moment it seems to hold true.
Great, that's good to hear. Thank you. Stella, I don't know.
I think perhaps we ought to wrap up.
Yeah, I think so. Fatima's just got some a feedback form and a PPT with the references to add to the chat.
Great.
So I think just on behalf of the committee, I'd like to say thank you to Stella and Stuart very much for a really interesting session. I know I've taken a lot away from it. And I'll hand it back to you two in a second. I'll also do a bit of publicity for the TNE SIG to say anyone coming to the 2nd of April Manchester event, we will be there. We're doing a very brief presentation. We'll be available to chat and to share more about the SIG, and more importantly, for you to have input on what the SIG will be doing. We really look forward to hearing from people. It's been great to have the discussion today, and we'd like to keep that going. And so please do get in contact as well via our contact information with ideas for new events, for ideas for discussions like this. We'll be sending out news shortly about a reading session online where we'll actually have a reading circle and an article to discuss. So thank you, Stella and Stuart. I don't know if you want to say anything else in closing, but it's been a great session.
Yes, thank you very much, Liz. That was and thank you everyone for coming. I just wanted to check, Fatima, have you put the PPT in the chat box? I couldn't see it. Oh, it's gone in. Right, I'm blind. It's too early in the morning. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Stuart.
My pleasure, as always, Stella. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.